Hi, everybody. We're excited to be here. Yesterday, I was actually next door, and at the Digital Health Summit, I was moderating a panel there. And a big topic, of course, was interoperability, MRIs to get them to talk to the electronic health record, remote patient monitoring hubs into the EHR, wearables into the EHR, and it occurred to me that as the wearable ecology is developing, that we're starting to come into our own data silo issue. I've been writing about a concept I call parables, which basically takes the value of different wearables on your person and to combine them into something better. And that's just one aspect. I really think that's going to start taking shape in 2020. And so as that happens, the ecology, all of us, will have to respond. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. And with me, I've got Elisabeth Bohlmann. She is Vice President of Marketing and Growth, both those things, at December Labs. And of course, Kathryn Fantauzzi. How did I do?
No, perfect.
Okay, good. And she's CEO and co-founder of Apollo Neurosystems. So welcome to be both.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So I wanted to start with you, Liz. I can call you Liz here, right? Sure. I think, as I see wearable startups, I see them sort of falling into two camps. One is that those that recognize that the wearable and the app are part and parcel of a platform, a product, and those who are focused on their hardware innovation and realize sometimes a little late in the process that, hey, we need an app. And so maybe for the benefit of that latter group, give us a little idea of what's involved in developing an app and coordinating with your product.
Sure. So if you look at app development for wearables, there's a few things that are very particular and that are different from just regular app development in general. So one of the things is that from a user perspective, really, the app and the wearable are one. They see it as one product. They don't differentiate and say, hey, here's a company that actually, created the hardware that, I'm going to use, that I'm going to wear, and here is an app development company. No, they really perceive it just as one. And if you think about it, for example, if you would research a product on Google and you type it in, one of the results, if that wearable has an app, that would come up would probably be, the App Store ratings. So again, if those App Store ratings, for example, would be negative, that would directly influence the perception that a user would have of that specific product. So I don't think there are too many data yet on actually, at the apps for wearables, affecting user satisfaction. But there are, statistics that say, for example, that users that have a bad experience with mobile apps think in 60%, bad about the company that built that app. So if you take that to the level of wearables, where really a lot of times the wearable without the app will not function or will not even start, you can just imagine how much higher that is. And then on the other hand, Christian was mentioning the importance of data and for wearables in general, for wearables sending over data and receiving data, and that also happens all through the app. For example, if you want to get meaningful analytics, you won't really be able to receive them. The product might be very good, but if you don't have a usable interface that will display that, then it won't be really worth it.
Yeah, and I think we're at the start 4 or 5 years ago, maybe everything was really kind of siloed. Fitbit is Fitbit, period. And things like, Google Fit are starting to incorporate other folks. How what does that mean for somebody going in to do an app now that maybe they didn't have to worry about a few years back?
I think on the one hand, again, today a wearable without an app really is, like, most of the time doesn't have any meaning. So in the example of Apollo, for example, you know, there's a couple of things that I think happen for, or that are true for many different products that we could highlight there. On the one hand, it's, you know, how do you connect with the wearable? So most of the times you do that via Bluetooth, but there's also, you know, a few other options from, you know, reading data through computer vision from, for example, a medical wearable device, or near field communication, NFC. But in this case, you know, we did it via Bluetooth, which is really good on battery power. So it's, you know, user-friendly in that sense. Then really, if you look at, you know, the actual user interface, most wearables don't really, you know, have a screen or a display. So the app really is the only user interface, you know, that a user sees firsthand. So again, you know, that's a big responsibility on the app. Then Apollo has not gone yet towards FDA approval, but it's something, you know, that they've been looking at from the very start. So that also is something totally different when it comes to app development, as you have to have different kind of development processes, different kind of unit testing. You have to have everything FDA compliant. Then another thing that happens a lot is, you know, the issue of scalability. When you have a product that involves hardware, you can't really update it all the time as you can an app. So it really is very essential that an app is being built from the very start, in the sense that you can add anything from gamification, communities, and other things to it, and keep the user really engaged, which is one of the things that we were talking with Kathryn today about. Is that maybe you want to take over there, but that it's so important for wearables to actually be user friendly and attractive and beautiful. So yeah, if you don't have that, then in the end, there's not that much value to the user sometimes.
Yeah, maybe we should take a step back and tell everybody about your product and what you're trying to achieve briefly, and then what sort of data and other things you're connecting to.
Oh, sure. So Apollo is and I'm Kathryn. I'm the CEO of Apollo, and Apollo actually started as a research project. So before this ever became a product, it actually started, and if anybody saw Dr. David Rabin talk a little bit earlier, it actually started as a research project at the University of Pittsburgh. So what we were looking to do was figure out, okay, there's lots of data, there's lots of ways that we can understand what happens with changes in the body, but how do we empower people to actually take control of their health? Because if you just provide, we actually did research on this, if you just tell someone that they're stressed out or that their sleep is bad and then there isn't a solution on how to remedy that, you actually can just make people more anxious. And they actually don't improve their lives, and then they stop using the wearable or stop using the data because it's frustrating for them. It's like being a kid in school and you keep getting a C- on the test and you can't figure out how to get better at it. And so for us, we were looking at ways to help intervene with the human body to actually improve people's resilience to stress. Essentially, when you get stressed out all the time from whatever that may be, from lack of sleep or just your chronic stress at work or your family life, whatever it may be, you end up getting run down over time, and this has wide sweeping effects for your mental and your physical health. And we can see that in biometrics, right? We can see that in your heart rate, your blood pressure, your heart rate variability. But then how do you help someone in the moment that they're stressed out actually improve those biometrics? And we discovered that vibration in a certain layered form almost feels like ocean waves, actually mimics what the body does when you deep breathe. And so we ended up developing, after doing clinical trials at the University of Pittsburgh, which demonstrated that we could actually change stress biometrics, so we can improve heart rate variability, we can take down heart rate under stress, we can improve blood pressure under stress. We tried to figure out, where would someone wear this, right? How could we most easily disseminate? Should this be in a bed? Should this be in a shirt? Should this be, every single different kind of form factor you could think of, and we came up with a wearable because that's what users told us. They said, I need something I can use when I need to fall asleep, but also when I need to fall asleep in my bed or on a plane, Or when I'm in, when I'm traveling in a weird hotel room, or when I'm in a meeting and I need to focus, or my boss is going to notice that I'm, falling asleep, or I can't stand sitting in front of the spreadsheet. I need something to help me, right? And so it became a wearable. And all of these things were around user experience, but the app was something so critical to what we do, not only to deliver, right? Deliver these frequencies, which you can pick from programs that are designed to help you focus or to help you wake up, or programs that you would set to help you fall asleep, but also for the intake of data, right? So the next phase of Apollo is integrating into these data systems to be able to show the users in real time that they actually, that your heart rate actually is going down. Your heart rate variability actually is going up. And so for us, from the very beginning, creating an app experience that is beautiful and really easy to use, and a device that is beautiful and also very easy to use and comfortable was something from the outset that we very much considered. And everything was customer inquiry and testing and iteration over the whole period of the development of the product.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, you started out by saying it's really something that you put on when you need it. And so in a sense, you can't be the one measuring to see when my heart rate variability is flatlined and I need to calm down, for example, or...
Right, but the app can integrate in with other wearables that you might be wearing.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Right, so in the future, let's say...
Or will work.
Right, we integrate with Apple Health Kit or other wearables that are being developed all over the place. If you can see that someone's trending down and we know what their baseline is, you can tell them, hey, you should use your Apollo. You are not doing great today, right? And it's an actual solution to the problem, like, hey, we noticed that your heart rate is really high. Okay, well, what's the person going to do about that? Well,
right.
And they have a solution to the problem now. And so they're, and one of the things when you're talking about silos, and you see that in healthcare all the time with different EMRs, different data systems, none of them are talking to each other. And that happens on the consumer side with wearables too, right? And then there are certain opportunities where like Health Kit is one platform where it all exists in one place, but not every wearable is sending all of their data to that place. It's okay, how do you bring the data together, but then how do you make it meaningful and actionable for the user, right? Now, how do they contextualize all this data that we're giving to them, and then what do they do about it? And so Apollo, what we're working on is creating an intervention, but also creating a context for all of that data such that it's useful.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, so that's sort of futures. You're working on it now,
Yeah,
but
we're working on it now.
okay. Are there specific platforms that you're looking at? I know earlier we talked about the Oura Ring. I don't know if that's something that
Yeah, I
you're
mean, the
looking
first
at,
one are ones where it's easy to access the platform, and then we are in talks with multiple other wearables about direct integration with their products.
I would think that'd be something they'd be pretty receptive to. Arguably, that gives them the answer to, hey, you're stressed, here's something you can do about it.
Right, and then also for the user experience, they are able to see, okay, I've been tracking my data, but now I'm using something that actually makes me better, right? And so that's good for both sides because you have a purpose to the data that you've been collecting, and a way to actually track and see that your health is improving over time, which ultimately is the goal, right? We started tracking with steps to try to encourage people to be fitter. Now we're tracking things like sleep so we can understand even deeper biometrics like heart rate variability. But ultimately the goal for all of these wearables and this whole ecosystem is to enable people to have more autonomy and control over their health.
Right.
I think that's something that is very important, to keep under consideration from the very start. And I think that's one of the things that we have enjoyed so much in working with Apollo, that there has been, a clear vision of, where does this start and where might this go at some point. And that is something, because really, if you think about it, when you're building a product, you have, the firmware, you have the hardware, you have the software. There are so many different teams that work at different velocities and that have to integrate at some point. And I think that is, anyone who has been working in the space knows how challenging that is. And if you go, down to the expo area and you go into, the aisles of health, sleep, wellness, wearables, you almost always see, the device along with the app. And one of the other things that I think is is very fundamental here is that we're always, gearing this towards, the health aspect of, Apollo, and, and this is really where the origin also comes from, as far as the research and everything. And so this, again, from a technical point of view, brings a lot of challenges to the table. For example, HIPAA compliance. I mean, if, at some point you would want to integrate, something as Apollo with some kind of medical data, for example, I mean, when you're an app development company, that means that your developers have to be trained in that regard. You have to have very specific documentation, the same as with FDA approval, for example. But then there's also the matter of accessibility. You had mentioned, that you had been envisioning from the beginning, when and what kind of moment people would be using Apollo. But then also when, for example, you're thinking about, using Apollo for different trials and everything, always when you have these kind of subgroups and within kind of, a health context, you have to look at people, that have any kind of disabilities, that, might also be relevant when you're, looking at something as simple as it seems, as the user interface.
Yeah, so as you start to pull together data from disparate silos and then turn that into actionable insight, here on this platform, for example, what sort of barriers? I mean, there are the obvious barriers, but how are you overcoming those barriers to to bring in data from the Oura Ring to be able to feed the Apollo device to say it's time to calm down? What are some of those challenges, and how are you?
I mean, I think the main challenge. So the main challenge is quality of the data, right? From the data sources. I mean, obviously there's the technical stuff, right? Like you have to connect in with Apple Health Kit, or you have to connect directly through an SDK. But I think, meaningful part that's more complicated, and what we're really specializing in, is understanding what data matters when grouped together, and how do you create profiles of that data, and then how do you understand context-wise why that data is changing around, so that you don't accidentally aggravate your user, right? Like, a lot of notifications are actually very annoying, right? And so you want to make sure that when you're providing guidance around people's health, that one, it's accurate as it can be, but also that it's meaningful, so you don't send them false alarms that their heart rate's super high. Like, yes, of course it is, I'm exercising.
Right.
Like, and so, you want to make sure that you're not, you're providing context, and that you're not creating anxiety or neuroses over the data, which is something I often see. Is that people are like, what is my HRV supposed to be? And I was like, well, just try to trend it upwards. Get some sleep. It's okay.
And I think that's something in general when you think about wearables and really the objectives that people have when it comes to wearables is you want it to be seamless, you want it to be easy to wear, you want it to be able to easily integrate into your life. And the same thing, happens again with the app, that you also want it to be intuitive. You want to know from the very start how everything works. You want the onboarding to be very intuitive. You want any kind of analytics that you might, be able to visualize to actually easily be giving you, next steps as far as, okay, so what does this mean for me? What kind of, insights can I get out of that? And I think that, just looking at this is kind of a parallel. This intuitiveness and this, really good fit in a way is also something that when you have any kind of collaboration is very important. That, I mean, we sometimes try to see ourselves, as if we were a wearable. When we integrate with companies such as Apollo, that kind of fit is really what makes this kind of partnership work.
Are you seeing some sort of? I mean, we all have a pretty good idea of what wearables can tell us, can't tell us or do at this point. Can you look out a few years based on what you're starting to see in development and what we might hope to see, and folks might start wanting to build?
For me in general, I mean, I think we're always looking towards improvements as far as the technology aspect of it. And I mentioned in the beginning some, trivial things such as battery power, but really those things, can be a pain. And when we see the development in general, it's been really going always, towards improving the product and the overall user experience. then as far as just user interface design and just really continuing to optimize that, I think that is also something that will continue to improve. But really, one of the milestones I believe will be kind of what happens with all of that data. And I mean, it's really interesting what has been happening with Apple Health Kit and with Google Fit. As far as accumulating kind of that data and making it also easier for app developers to access that data. And overall creating something that can be meaningful in the end. And I mean, if you also look at it from more philosophical point of view, wearables are most of the time supposed to make your life better in some point. I mean, you're looking always towards improvement, especially when it comes to health. And I think Apollo is a great example of that. You're always looking towards really making lives better to give additional value to people. And yeah, I think that's kind of the mission that we're all on here.
Okay, I realized I didn't ask to see if anybody had any questions, but if anybody wants to ask something, just say hi, or I don't know, are there microphones? Sorry.
They're over there.
Okay, good. Okay, well,
there's one other thing I think that when we are looking at data and mechanism, one of the things that I think that trend-wise that's really happening is we went from tracking steps and fitness to more meaningful data collection around bigger health concepts, right? Like sleep and stress and heart, like the cardiac indicators and all of these things. And I think what's happening now with wearables is I think there's going to be a new class of wearables, one that actually do things, right, that actually affect the body. Then you're seeing a trend. Doppel was up here, we're up here. If you go down, there's other kinds of wearables, right, for increased memory. So I think mental health and over holistic lifestyle is going to be a thing beyond fitness. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that people are starting to look at is how does this integrate into my life more completely? Right. And so I think, product is one thing, and speaking to app, content, mm-hmm. right? Like, how do you keep this user engaged with you as part of their ecosystem to improve their health, right? And so how do we better integrate wearables into the broader ecosystem so that we're not that gadget that someone has on, but instead is this meaningful tool that they use to improve their lives over time?
Right, and part of that is figuring out when the person would be most receptive to hearing about the content, or, I mean, even something as simple as you're stressed. I mean, you send that at the wrong time, and you're like, I know.
Thanks.
Right?
Thanks for
that. Thanks for nothing.
Yeah, and AI is a huge component of that. Mm-hmm. And as we talk about data and data silos, like as data becomes in a greater platform, and we create content, it's actually learning to personalize that content and curate those experiences for those individual people.
Yeah.
You stated right at the beginning about the pairable concept, where we all know we've got numerous data capture points for wearables, whichever depends on what we're doing and where we are and the type of environment we're in. But you picked on the point of pairables. Could I just ask you what's your vision of bringing real connectivity to wearables in the next year or so? And can I ask you specifically, Mike, because that's your idea, how do you see it mapping out?
Sure. I think if you look at wherever you're going to strap or insert something, there are different strengths and weaknesses. I mean, this is a great place for a display, and about the most hostile place you can find to be taking biometrics. So this is better. Its battery life is an issue. This is better still. And so I think there's an opportunity to create a team. And that's, and it can be partners. It doesn't have to be a Samsung or an Apple making 3 devices that all work together. I mean, there's partnership opportunities too, but I think folks need to be open to that, because this is going to have to be the value decade, and it's going to have to start now. I think the ecosystem is better doing it together.
I think one of the interesting points also that Kathryn was mentioning is the importance of content, and how that kind of integrates in this entire ecosystem that we're kind of talking about. So just to give you an example, one company, one startup that we've worked with, they have dedicated themselves to early breast cancer detection. And one of the things that they found was that, especially in the US, it's very hard for women, to take that step towards, getting their tests done and everything. So in this case, for example, they developed a wearable, which is, a patch that you can place on your breast and that then, via computer vision can give you kind of a heat map that can give you at least, kind of an idea on, if you have a higher risk factor or so. But knowing that this entire topic is very hard for women, kind of the first approach that they're having is, okay, let's build an app that's, targeting those women, but giving them content, giving them extra value. It's kind of surrounding their overall health and also their anything from menstruation cycle to pregnancy, etc. And so they're kind of organically integrating then that into awareness around breast cancer that then connects to their wearable. So I think just overall understanding what kind of people you can reach with your product and how you can improve their lives, and how sometimes not the most direct way, but kind of a more innovative way is actually the path of success in that sense.
That makes sense. I know, was there another question? If not, yes, no? Okay. If not, I just want to ask, what can't you believe I didn't ask? I stumped both of you too?
What can I not believe you didn't ask?
Well, and then answer it. Naturally.
And then answer it. Okay.
Not just leave you
so
halfway
Mike, I'm doing your
through.
job. I guess one of the things that I notice, particularly when we're in these technology-centric settings, is how do you understand who your user is and why they want to use your product and how that product benefits them. And that's one thing that I see. You were talking about there's some startups that start and they've got a really beautiful hardware, but they kind of forget about the app. I think that that's also endemic with development across the board. You come up with this really cool technological solution, but then you find out that nobody actually cares about your solution, or that the way that your solution works is actually entirely different than you thought it would be, right?
Yeah.
Totally different population, totally different use case than you ever considered in the beginning. And so I think in terms of the ecology and the development, I think having an open mind about how these things kind of develop and really talking to people, lots of people from the very beginning is so crucial to development from an app perspective and a hardware perspective to make sure that we're creating meaningful products for people to use.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all for your attention and your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.